Disclaimer: this show is not for the faint of heart or the easily offended. The views expressed here are that of the show hosts only, and not their wives, girlfriends, husbands, boyfriends, polygamous partners, employers, music artists, businesses, or anyone other than the Cognitive Disillusions podcasters. The explicit tag is there for a good reason. Please proceed with caution.
Every one of us will have to decide whether or not we want to keep this great republic or whether we're willing to sacrifice it and surrender it to tyranny.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Cognitive Disillusions podcast, where we address the current issues of today with brash humor, skepticism, or aggression to invoke critical thinking in the masses. We take our tightly held beliefs, everyone's tightly held beliefs, match them up with current events, politics, and religion, then throw them to the fires of skepticism. We magnify the so-called logic and then blow it all up. There is no green zone of safety for a lack of critical thinking. This is episode number 7. Your hosts today are Joel, John, and Al, and we are your tormentors. How are you both doing today, Joel and John?
Decent.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Having a sick grandfather that I'm hoping will mend on a relative level. So, kind of thinking about him.
How's he holding up?
Well, again, it's all relative. He has Parkinson's, which is, you may know, is a pretty awful condition to endure. And I think he's doing okay, all things considered.
I empathize. My 80-some-year-old father is dealing with throat cancer for the second time after being cleared. Never smoked a day in his life, and he's got throat cancer. He's probably got it from donuts.
Sorry to hear that.
I'm sorry to hear about donuts. No, I'm sorry. I really am sorry about your
Now I'm
dad.
fucking hungry.
Seriously, man, anything will give you cancer.
Well, just the wrong free radical at the right moment, I suppose, and
well said.
Yeah.
So you're saying radicals are a bad thing?
Well, free radicals.
They can be.
Okay, so the topic of today was actually brought up by John, and you wanted to cover the benefits of religion, more specifically, benefits of structured hope?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Okay, you want to define that so that we're all on kind of the same page on what you mean by that?
Well, structure is important, as I'm sure both of you will agree. Any kind of structure will not do. It has to be a particular kind of structure that is beneficial to both the individual and to society at the same time, which in a free society such as ours is problematic at best, because what society needs is not necessarily what the individual needs. In the topic of religion, I think that some of that structure comes from the notion that there is something to look forward to, that no matter what is going on in this life, whether you're losing your job or your grandfather is dying or your father is dying, it doesn't matter. There is going to be something better at some point, and that's the structured hope that I'm talking about. Do you guys think that that is a good thing or a bad thing? Do you think it's false hope? Do you think it's just lying to yourself, or do you think that there's a place in society for that sort of thing? And do you think that A, religion provides that, and B, does it have to be religion to provide that?
Joel, you want to take this? You want to start off?
Well, my first thought is that if it's a feeling that's not based on anything that's necessarily real, it is ultimately a delusion of a kind. To me, it almost seems like we might be discussing whether or not there are good delusions and bad delusions.
You can go there if you want. Absolutely, sure. We can do that.
That might be certainly the angle from which I would probably begin to approach it. But I also want to make sure that we unpack everything that you've mentioned within the context of your proposal here.
Well, I think it's a pretty loose proposal when it comes to addressing is hope good or bad can be dependent on under what circumstances that hope is being presented. An example I use is the doctor scenario. Doctor comes in and says, you've got 2 years to live when he knows you really have 3 months to live. That's false hope, and I think that's bullshit hope.
Is it a benevolent lie? Is that a moral thing to do?
It depends entirely on the person, and it's got to be a case-by-case basis. Sort of like when you during Katrina, you tell everybody, hey, we're going to go to the Coliseum. There's going to be food, water, shelter there. There is a positive hope to that, but when you don't deliver on certain things, or you don't have something set up, in John's example, some structure, it's a false hope, and it's a bad hope. And if you don't have certain things in play, like the rapes that occurred there, you have negative impacts to it. I think for some, religion provides the positive hope and the negative hope. Mostly the negative hope is how I see it from both a former insider's perspective and an outsider's perspective. I think it's more detrimental in religion than it is in a secular humanist kind of viewpoint, but that's a bias I have.
So we talked about hope. I think that's a harder concept to understand. So I do feel as though John set this up in such a way as to describe it as structured hope. So maybe we need to get a better definition of what that means.
Well,
from your perspective,
the communal aspects of religion are undeniable. You have little communities. Some would call them echo chambers, but they give structure where structure either is not perceived or is non-existent. For example, in the Old West, there are plenty of examples in literature and in newspapers, and I'm sure you could find some of this stuff in textbooks. There are some examples where there was no local government. The local government was the church. You had a preacher and then the town. Whether or not the town participated was irrelevant. That structure was there, and they had a leader that they could turn to. In the case of hope, someone has a situation in their life. Let's say I get cancer. I don't understand cancer. I don't know what it is. I don't know why this is happening to me, and nobody's got any answers for me. The doctor just babbles on in Latin, and I don't understand a word of it. But this preacher over here is giving me an explanation that I can understand. Whether it's true or not is really irrelevant when it gives me hope that either I'm going to pull through it, which has medical benefits. As long as the person believes something strong enough, they can and should make it happen. I'm talking about medical situations. Somebody is sitting on a bed, hopeless, they're probably going to die. But if they have got hope, if they've got something to live for, they are probably going to fight through it. They're going to try to, at least. 50-50. I don't know what the percentage would be, but I'm sure there are more. Go ahead.
The pitfall that I see just glaring at us is if a situation as you've described, if a person is given really bad information, is what it is. It's just bad information. It's not correct. There certainly might be some comfort in that, but that comfort also might cause them to make decisions that are based upon that bad information that actually will hinder them rather than then help them. And I know there are certainly some studies out there that I can't necessarily quote that will say that if you do feel more, I guess, positive about your circumstance, that it can have effects physiologically. But I'd also say that if you have some situation where you've got a preacher that says, everything's going to be fine, and that causes a person to not make choices that will, in fact, benefit their condition. For example, and this is somewhat extreme, but if a person has lymphoma and they've got somebody telling them, "Don't worry, it's okay," and they keep smoking cigarettes, which obviously shows that it's going to exacerbate the issue quite a bit, then that is a problem. So, and that's just one kind of example that's obvious.
Well,
there subtlety and nuance plays a big role in this as well.
And the other side of that is you're also seeing, well, I shouldn't say you are, I see quite a bit in religious circles the purposeful misunderstanding or misdirection of actual information, or the want, will, or direction to remain ignorant of something, sort of like in your cancer example. Going to that priest may not understand it, gives wrong information that, in Joel's case, could lead towards bad decisions, bad things that occur.
Kind of like, if you just pray about it, it'll go away.
Yeah, or also in the regard of religions have been, not all, but most religions have been teaching people, don't question, don't ask these questions in this way or whatever. So people get predisposed. So if the doctor isn't making any sense, they don't go, "That's not making sense. Could you explain it again?" They go, "Oh, I must be stupid if I don't know what he's meaning, so I'm going to go talk to my priest later," and get the wrong information anyway. Versus going to the doctor and going, "Look, you're not explaining this in a way I can understand this. There's somebody else that I can go to." And if that communicator, because that's one of the things doctors are supposed to be. They're supposed to be communicators. Granted, a lot of them are not good at that. And that's being addressed in medical school now, of how do you communicate with a good bedside manner? How do you take the knowledge and the emotional side of things and connect those to create the impact necessary to emphasize the understanding? And I think that religion, and I've seen religion specifically do this, more so now in the younger religions, Scientology, Mormonism, and Islam, older religions such as Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hindu, they've kind of gotten past some of the constraints that they had before. Not all sects of them do, but most of the sects go, "All right, we can't be fucking retarded. Let's take a few steps forward and see where we go with this." Mm-hmm. You see that with the Catholic Church going, accepting evolution as a scientific fact, and going out against flat Earth theory and going with heliocentricity for the solar system versus, geocentricity. Steps, baby steps, but the younger religions are really holding tight to this ridiculous mentality. Did any of that make sense?
I don't know that I would describe it as holding on to ridiculous mentality. I would describe it as holding on to ridiculous tradition, perpetuating traditions that do not benefit the rest of society, and I do not disagree with you.
Don't you see do you see a correlation between holding those ridiculous traditions that hold a mindset that holds ridiculous belief?
Say that again?
Do you see a correlation between the religions and sects that still hold ridiculous traditions also having and holding a mindset that exacerbates ridiculous ideas?
I do.
I mean, some, yeah. I mean,
I can
certainly
yeah.
present. I wonder, and I don't mean to deviate too far from what you were saying,
No, we're
Al,
freeform.
but
We're freeform tonight. Deviate.
you really have to look at these as, you know, these things, especially when we're dealing with end of life circumstances, that what you're doing when you have a pseudo countdown clock happening is you're making a decision to invest time into either telling someone something that's not true in order to provide them with hope, or empowering them with facts so that they can make decisions based on the way things are. And I don't see, you know, the benefit to deluding someone. I think it's immoral ultimately, and you know, the very concept that we've all heard that I would much rather deal with an uncomfortable truth than a comfortable lie, because then I can make decisions based on reality, and I think that's very important. Now, if we're talking about no hope, if you know we're telling somebody you've got no hope, it does get a little gray, but not much. Not for me personally. How we deal with that on a societal level gets complicated. I mean, it wasn't so long ago that we, in the medical field, would address the husbands of wives who were diagnosed with terminal illnesses, and we would allow the husband to decide what to tell their wife, and that led to all sorts of chaos. In fact, it was described pretty well in Sam Harris's very short book. I almost hesitate to call it a book, essay more or less, called Lying, and he really does unpack some of this very well. I would recommend a listen to it. It's on audiobook if you guys get a chance. But I don't think that there's a benefit that outweighs being truthful with people and being honest. Now, you can be honest and courteous simultaneously. Those are not mutually exclusive concepts. We understand that when we give somebody bad news, myself working in the medical field, you can't just give them the bad news and say, here, you know, figure it out. You then have to take steps, all sorts of steps, whether it's getting them the right treatment, but also getting them help with dealing with a lot of these end-of-life issues, the depression, the hopelessness. All of those things need to be addressed, but I don't think you can do that in a moral way by lying. And ultimately, that's what, to me, that's where the hard line here is: are you lying to somebody, or are you telling the truth? Are you being truthful with them? It's their choice. If they say, I don't want to hear it, don't tell me, I don't want to know, then they're then allowed the opportunity to make the choice. But other than that, if you're making the choice for somebody else, that is an immoral thing to do, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying, but let me throw a different scenario at you here. Let's try something a little different. So, two people in a hospital, both diagnosed with exactly the same disease, both have, you know, X amount of time to live. One is told by a priest, I think that when you die, X is going to occur and everything's going to be okay. And the other one has a different counselor who tells him, you know, after you die, you don't need to worry about any of this anymore. All the pain's going to go away. You don't have to think about this anymore. Which one do you think, Joel and Al, which one is going to, in your opinion, have a more comfortable passing?
I think that's a faulty setup.
I think it's a faulty setup too. I did that on purpose. I want your opinion, though.
Well, here's why. I won't address it in that way. And this is why. Because you're not going to have a secular or an atheist counselor going, well, it's just all going to go away at the end. You won't have to worry about anything. They're going to be giving resources. They're going to be giving education to pain clinics, to, and even if the person is religious, giving them guidance towards what will give them the most comfort in the last days that they have.
No, I'm not. I'm not talking about comfort in the last days that they have. I'm talking about comfort with what happens afterwards.
Well, because we don't know ultimately what happens afterwards. And if you've got a priest saying, well, I absolutely know, you're fucking lying to me.
And same with the atheist.
What do you mean?
If an atheist is, or a secular person is giving absolutes in that scenario, that they're not doing their job either.
Right, and I never said that they would.
No. I know. I'm not saying that you did. I'm just kind of piggybacking a little bit here.
Yeah, well, if the scenario was exactly described as by John, both of those people fucking did the wrong thing. Period.
Yeah, that's where I am. That's where I am.
If it's only in that hard scenario, then yeah, both of them were fucking wrong. Both of them did the wrong thing.
So really the morality here, the ethics, comes in play in the terminology that you use. Instead of saying, I know X, saying, I believe X.
No. It's in the delivery of the information. So say, and I'll give you a moral and ethical approach from a priest point of view. If I was counseling this patient as a former ordained minister, going there and going, hey, this is how much time you have left. What do you believe? Okay, you believe that you're going to die and go to heaven. Okay, what are some steps that we can do to alleviate the pain, to help you make your time here as valuable and as comfortable as possible? That's the moral approach.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. What I think Al is saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I know you will. If what you do, say again, being in the medical field, you provide the information, and then the next step that you do is you listen. That's the next step. You don't tell, you listen, and you adapt your message based on whatever it is they want, ultimately. As long as you've given the information that's your moral obligation to do, then you can, whatever you're comfortable with and what they're comfortable with, that's what happens. You listen, you get them to the places that are going to make them feel most comfortable, palliative care, all of that stuff. You listen.
Yeah, as from an atheist and humanist standpoint. Now, granted, those are two separate, completely different approaches. One's a theological position, one's a behavior and mannerism. But from that perspective, if I'm counseling or I'm at the bedside of somebody who's extremely religious or somebody who's moderately religious, say I'm at my wife's bedside, she's religious. I would tell her the information of what's occurring and say, now, what do you need from me to make you the most comfortable? And if she goes, well, I want to pray for a minute, whatever her belief structure is or whatever she wants to do, I'll sit with her. I'm not going to actively say the prayer, but she can pray all she wants to. I'm going to sit with her because she needs that comfort, that connection, that humanistic value to her. Simple as that. And if she wants to see a priest, get a hold of a priest. Have them come over. The issue is
that would be the next step too. I mean, we make this even easier if you've got these two, patient X and patient Y, and one is a Christian and one is a Hindu, you're not going to approach the Hindu patient with Christian values. You're going to get them to the resource that is able to provide that comfort for them. After you've delivered the facts.
Does that make sense, John? Are we answering the question or the scenario as fully as we can so that it's clear?
Sure.
What do you think in that scenario?
The notion that whatever happens after death is going to be better than what is happening now is maybe where we're hanging up. The lie, and and it doesn't really matter what religion you're talking about. Even Buddhists. I mean, they
so is that an admission that an afterlife is a lie?
It's an admission that I don't know.
Okay.
Not an admission that it's a lie. Now, so
we don't know either.
Taking this in a different direction, I did mention the whole of society at the beginning. Let's take this in a somewhat different direction. So the concept of eschatology. Okay, here's a thing for you. I'm sure you're familiar with the notion that everything that happens is part of God's plan. Yes.
The notion, certainly.
Familiar with the notion, yes.
I'm familiar with that construct of religious indoctrination, yes.
You're not going to get him too far into that, John.
So, let me describe something else for you here. Imagine for an instant that God is not this big guy, bearded white man up in the sky.
That shouldn't be too hard.
Okay, so Zeus is out. Got it.
Imagine, Sistine Chapel is out, Zeus is out, there you go. Imagine instead of God being this bearded white man in the sky, imagine instead that God is the force of, let's call it, okay, so on the topic of eschatology, the idea that everything is God's plan. Instead of thinking of God as this bearded white man in the sky, imagine that God is a force of nature. Call it entropy if you want. The notion that everything is progressing in a particular fashion. Whether or not you're getting what you want now, sooner or later everything's going to work itself out. This is the kind of structured hope that I'm talking about. The notion that whatever is happening now, you got to slug through it, but it's really irrelevant in the long run, and that what you're doing now, nobody's going to remember 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's a humbling thing for me to imagine that whatever pain I'm suffering now is really irrelevant. It really sucks for me, but the people around me don't care. Am I making sense so far?
You're making sense, but I think you're discounting the actual empathy and understanding of others.
No, I don't discount the idea that somebody else could have empathy for me.
I don't think that he is either, Al. It really is. We're talking about a kind of some built-in mechanisms from evolutionary sense. We're not capable of fully appreciating someone else's circumstances above our own and beyond certain time thresholds. It's just it would overload the system.
I understand that concept, and I do realize that, and fully understand and accept that in 10,000 years, every person that I've ever known and cared about is going to be gone. It's not going to matter to me.
Not going to take that long.
Well, I use the extreme example for a reason. But to say that there's a structured plan in it, a deity that controls everything. If there is a deity out there, he's a dick.
Why is that?
All the pain and suffering that people go through, if that deity exists, that was a fucking douchey way of doing it. If it had the power to start a universe, it had the power to choose the type of universe it created. It had the power to align the universe so that everything occurred. So it had the power to know that little Susie on 10th Street is getting raped by her stepdad. So it knew that that was going to occur and put that child in pain anyway. It's the same concept of can a God create a heaven where there's free will and no pain? If you believe in that construct, the deity had the power to create free will and no pain and no evil here. And thus, since it created a world, a universe that has that, it's a dick. It's malevolent, period.
Well, it's paradoxical.
It's very
Certainly.
paradoxical. That's the Epicurean argument that you're using.
Right.
And I'll buy that.
I'm aware.
I'll buy that. But here's the thing. Creation is what it is. From my perspective, you cannot have pleasure without pain. Again, talking from an Epicurean standpoint. There's a balance between the two. And where one or the other comes out of balance, remember we're talking Epicurean here, it becomes a problem. If you have too much pain, it's a problem. If you have too much pleasure, it's a problem. The objective is finding balance. So, from my perspective, for example, I mentioned cancer earlier. Cancer is not a plague from God. Cancer is a feature of creation. It's part of the natural order. Cells mutating, that's what made us what we are. That's evolution. So something evolves in the wrong direction or in a non-beneficial direction, that's cancer. Something evolves in a beneficial direction, that's, hey, wow, you're a dude with gills, you can breathe underwater, that's awesome. But the notion that God causes everything to happen is both correct and incorrect in my opinion. God started the wheel.
So?
God created everything, which means he created the good and the bad. From my perspective,
Is this a prime mover
sure, yeah,
argument?
Sure, you can say that. Are you speaking from the deist perspective of prime mover?
What I'm trying to do is understand where you're coming from on this. Just because you are, I wouldn't say making claims, but certainly making suggestions that seem contradictory. So I'm having trouble following.
So, yeah, are you presenting the theistic deity or a deistic deity?
Difficult for me to say in terms that I can understand.
Okay, simple breakdown between the two, and I know you're aware of these. Deistic, started the universe, hands off. Theistic actually answers prayers, intervenes, reads thoughts, watches you masturbate in the shower, that kind of shit.
Combination of both.
Well, it's really one or the other, because
that's where the paradoxical thing comes in here.
It's really not one or the other, because if you've got a creator that created everything, not necessarily hands off, that's not necessarily what deists believed. That's what a few deists that I can think of believed, but some actually did. Okay, so I pray for world peace. And world peace arrives, and I think that that's because I prayed for it. Well, no, actually it's not because I prayed for it. I prayed for it, but it was already in the works before I prayed for it. So
the point of prayer then would be, or the role of prayer would be what at that point?
Hope.
So, well, if you're asserting that a deity has a plan, and is a theistic intervening deity that started everything and intervenes with everything and knows the whole plan, your prayer is really irrelevant and kind of presumptive. You're going to the deity of the universe that you believe in and go, hey, I know you've got a plan, but I want shit.
I will not disagree
Well,
with that.
it's not. I actually think I think I can understand this. It is presumptuous for sure, but
Yeah.
also it's a relative. It's the relative nature of where you are in the universe. So if it causes you to, I'm really playing, I guess, God's advocate in this case.
Well,
If it
depends.
causes
if
you
you
to
really look
feel
at it, the
hope.
deity of the Bible is worse than the fucking devil in the Bible. I'm just saying.
Well, we're I don't think we're
That's a
necessarily talking
whole
about the
other
Bible
topic.
here either. So, what I'm hesitant to do is to get too far down the rabbit hole that we often do of proofs for God. That I don't think that's
No.
where we need to go here. So, from the perspective of the person, which is simultaneously valid and important, it does cause a seemingly paradoxical situation where the prayer matters and doesn't matter at the same time because of perspective, because of
Yes.
of consciousness, because of sentience.
More to
So-
the point, self-sentience.
Yeah.
It could be beneficial in most cases, like intercessory prayer studies that have actually been done, double-blind studies, not the religious studies that were verified false. But
Granted.
the intercessory prayers that were double-blind studies, they've shown a direct correlation between those that were prayed for and knew it got worse. Those that were prayed for and didn't know it had the same level of positive and negatives as those that weren't prayed for and didn't know it. And those that weren't prayed for and knew it, that they weren't being prayed for, but weren't religious, got better faster. So there's actually a direct correlation.
It's pretty, and I think it's pretty clear that when prayer works, it's solely by accident.
Well, it's false verification.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you just think about it from the perspective of you've got everybody praying to stay alive, only the people that survive are the ones that are around to say it worked. You don't have the counter perspective.
It's a little bit like that meme where the look-alike or proposed white male Jesus is sitting next to the kid with a laptop and says, "Oh, little Susie, I'm sorry you didn't get 1 million likes. You're going to fucking die tomorrow." You know
That's
what I mean?
weird.
Well, I also, like I said that we should have maybe in this topic avoid getting into proofs for God. I also think that maybe proofs for prayer is, the evidence is pretty clear, but I don't think it's necessarily relevant to the philosophical conversation that we're having.
No, that's
some
really
extent.
not going with any of this.
Sorry?
So, okay, in the last 100 years or so, but longer than that, but in the last 100 years or so, we've really gone from a societal-based society to an individual-based society. Have either of you noticed this?
Yes and no.
It depends on how you look at this, because what we've gone from is to even some extent is a few people having all of the control over all the people to more people having control over their lives, and I think that we actually feels as though we're actually regressing in that regard. So it was never that we were never in a point where everybody meaning even the patricians and so on, we were never at a point where everybody had the same rights or did the same things for society, and now everybody's looking out for themselves. I think that's kind of an illusion.
I can see where your perspective is coming from, John.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree with the assumptions that it makes when you present it, because what religious communities are seeing is that a lot of people are moving away from religious communities towards secular communities that emphasize the individual progress of the person. So you're seeing a lot less of the herd mentality
Mm-hmm.
that is seen in religion, more of the individualistic herding cats mentality of the atheist, secular, humanist societies.
Interesting.
Well, I think that you're seeing that from our perspective of where we are in sort of the hierarchy of the world. I mean, it's certainly happening more in more of the developed countries, but I don't think that's happening. I don't think it's a trend that's universal.
I see that trend universally when those societies get exposed to the internet.
Well, that's because the internet is a transcendent being in and of itself.
Whoa! Don't give it anthropomorphic properties.
I'm not.
Stepping
and
into
you're right.
John's territory here.
I don't want to give it that, but it does. It does have a knowledge. It does have a power. It's still chaos, but it's a delivery system.
It's Pandora's box, and that's why I love Pandora's box. It's a great story. Go ahead, John. I mean, I'm sorry. We kind of just stepped John right out of that conversation.
I know.
Please.
It's okay. I enjoyed the hell out of listening to it.
Please, John.
I do hope we can get back to hope.
Well, it's the same thing. What people look for in religion, in my opinion, is either okay. So a lot of people have suggested that liberals are only interested in getting something for nothing, and I can't disagree with the notion that, I mean, looking at communism as a good thing is exactly that. You're looking for a free ride. You're not looking for universal peace. You're not looking for everybody being equal. You're looking for justice. You're looking for a sense of equality without looking at the damage that it does. When you're in a big way, religion is the same way. And remember, I'm tying these two things together. So you've got the one side that looks like they want a free ride and they're willing to make everybody else pay for it. And on the other side, you've got people who are looking for a free ride and they're willing to make everybody else pay for it. Do you see where I'm going with this? And do you see why?
Yes.
And do you see how this ties to hope?
And here we are back again talking about life not thriving on the poles, because that's
a great example.
Really, I mean, you're going to get the same shit for different reasons the farther away from the center you get. I mean, that's what justice is maintaining some balance, right? Right?
And I will give religion one thing. I will.
Why?
Because they were great at setting up communities, community services initially. They had the funding, they had the manpower, and
they had the control.
They had a top-down structure that drove communities, especially the poor groups, to care about each other. But you're also now seeing that without the overhead structure control in humanist societies that are communities that are growing. We're getting more benefit groups out there. We're getting more shelters, homeless shelters, things like that out there, and community groups that religion for the longest time had dominated and tried to claim as their own.
And why do those people do those things?
Well, here's what it is.
Species, period.
That's where I want to go with this too. Is if a person is invested in society, and there are ways, good, better and worse ways to go about fostering that sentiment in people. If a person's invested in society, then you're not going to have. Well, you always have some group of people that are going to look for that free ride on the top and on the bottom, anywhere in between, I suppose. But those other ones, top and bottom, seem to be the most glaring. So, how do you get people invested in society? And the answer for that, to some extent, has been religion. And I think that you're now seeing a trend like you say, of humanism, where that's not the basis for achieving that goal, which is getting people invested in society. That the religion is not the basis for doing that. It's just empathy. It's love. And I you might be able to make the argument, John, or anybody, that that's the central thesis around religion is love. But I would question that assumption if you did. But so
No,
we have to be invested in society, and when you're invested on an emotional level, there's your hope. So the mechanism for creating that investment, we can then evaluate which mechanisms are better and which are worse, which ones tend to lead to less corruption on the top and on the bottom, and which ones tend to lead to more corruption. And so that, is that a pretty good breakdown of that, of hope, societal hope?
Decent. I would add a couple of things.
Sure.
The idea of selfishness. There's a very careful balance there. Balance is a theme that we keep coming back to, and I think for a very good reason. If there's too much selfishness, it's a problem. If there's not enough selfishness, it's a problem. I would ask, why are the humanists doing anything for the poor or for people who are less fortunate than they are? Why are they doing that? Because it is contrary. Now, hear me out on this. It is absolutely contrary to natural selection and to evolution for anyone to care about someone else that is not carrying their genes.
I totally disagree with that. Totally disagree with that.
There's multiple points here. One, humanism isn't Darwinianism. There's a distinct difference there.
Granted.
And humanism comes about through an enlightened mindset of we are all one species. We care about each other, as well as the other species on this planet, as well as the planet. There's a saying in humanism, I am fourth, because the individual is actually the fourth tier on the structure. Society comes first, the planet comes first, and then it's society, and then others, and then yourself. So your viewpoint is realizing that, yes, we're all one species. We need to care about each other, because raising the overall well-being of everybody is paramount.
It is an enlightened thing, but I'm gonna make the case right now that is very much a Darwinian perspective for a whole bunch of reasons. Mm-hmm. One, you can't just look out for your gene pool. You have to keep your gene pool dynamic. You have to look. You can't be screwing your sister and continuing a line like that, or you end up with the British royalty.
Depends. Is your sister hot?
I don't have a sister, but if I did, I probably wouldn't bang her no matter how hot she was. So that established. There's definitely an evolutionary reason, a Darwinian evolutionary reason, several of them, for empathy to be part of our structure and our experience. And empathy causes an investment in your local group, regardless of your family. Yes, you want evolutionary want, I use that word very loosely. You want your immediate family, of course, to be safe. You have that built in, but you also need to have a society that's dynamic enough as far as genetically, so that you can keep the diseases from starting and those kinds of things that happen when you're in too closed of a society. So,
and the closed society, the tribal societies, are what allowed altruism to really evolve. And you see this.
Was that a self plug right there? altruism. I heard you.
Giggity. No, the altruistic mindset was from social species that we evolved from, because those social species, those tribes, knew that the other people they were going to interact with on a day-to-day basis were going to be family or close kin. And if you screw over your family and your close kin, you get shunned. So the altruistic nature comes from Darwinian evolution, as observed by Charles Darwin, but later proved through the genetic tree and things like that. But that mentality, that behavior, is built into us through the evolutionary process of being a social species.
But
Well,
still,
you
you're
also
talking about
have.
kin.
Go ahead, John.
You're still
John.
talking about kin. What happens when
Well,
you
let me project the other reason behind this is kind of a mutually assured destruction thing. If you can build a working relationship with people that you aren't necessarily in kinship with, then you have a situation where you can combine resources and thrive even more. So there are plenty of Darwinian evolutionary reasons for us to be benevolent to each other.
Well, it does.
That balance all this out. Again, balance.
Yeah, it spans out to other people, because you knew, and your social species knew, that you had to incorporate other tribes through marriage and through sex for procreation to keep that gene pool open. So that altruistic nature is also going to expand to other social species and others of your kind that are farther away, because you're going to incorporate them with trade and, occasional warring factions and things like that. So that's why it spans out to strangers, is that altruistic nature is already in us.
And so you have these
No.
these two competing.
Well, what do you mean no, John? I'm hearing a solid no from you.
And you're going to get a solid no, because you're still talking about selfishness. The reason people trade and get outside of their box is for survival. You're not there's no survival trait out there for the person who is donating something to someone who is in need. Not in today's society. In today's society, it benefits someone to hoard resources.
No,
There's
because the
absolutely-
social...
I disagree with
There
that.
are also social repercussions that come with that. Because we're a social species. You see this with the capuchin monkey trials, where one's given a grape and the other one's not given a grape. The one that doesn't get the grape gets fucking pissed. And if they were in the same cage, there would be theft. So fairness and treating each other the same and sharing the things, even across boundaries and across spaces, benefits you and your tribe. Because if you go and you've got a wounded fellow human on the side of the road, you take care of that human, it benefits you nothing at the time. Could benefit you later when he goes back to his tribe and he goes, hey, this guy from this tribe just saved my fucking life. Now you've got two tribes that are friends that wouldn't have been. So yeah, there's always a little bit of selfishness in it, but the initial thought isn't the selfishness. It's I see this person who's hurting. I wouldn't want to be the person who's hurting. So I'm going to give them some of my stuff so they're taken care of.
I think that
And both of these things both of these concepts happen simultaneously, and it's a balance between the two that occurs. That you can't. It's like trying to extricate space and time. They are one thing, and yet the same concept applies to the selfish gene as well as the empathetic and altruistic gene. These things have to coexist, and you can't extricate them but from a philosophical perspective, which we're trying to do, apparently.
Absolutely. And there's that word again, balance. So,
But we're just talking about the same thing from a different perspective is all we're doing.
we really are.
Shit, we just became a fucking echo chamber.
That sucks.
See what happens when you just have a reasoned discussion?
I honestly think that just now an atheist, a humanist, and a Christian all agreed on something philosophical. That's unprecedented.
That actually happens quite a bit, John.
Yeah, but not on the topics that we're speaking, not on those
not on
topics
these
that define those characteristics.
Well,
Absolutely.
the key tie-in here is John has expressed himself as a humanist in some way.
I'm a Christian humanist. What do you want?
Okay. Joel is a humanist. Yes, Joel?
From my understanding of it, I do get tricky with certain labels. That happens to be one of them, just because I think it's, to some extent, just been bastardized in a lot of cases.
So we'll call him humanist
I'm
fluid.
not going to commit. Yeah.
Humanist fluid, kind of like gender fluid.
Yeah.
So we all kind of have humanist leanings, so I don't really see that as I see that more as the thing that ties us together and why we agree on those.
Well, we are good people. I mean, that's what this comes down to. If you just take that concept that, I know I talk about Sam Harris a lot. I like the guy on some things, but
why don't you go marry him then?
The moral landscape. Well, I am fluid, but the moral landscape, and I totally lost my train of thought.
You did it to
Al,
yourself.
quit being racist.
There he goes again. Just for the record, the reason I call myself a Christian humanist because I'm a Christian, but
And a human?
I am not a Gospel of John Christian. I'm not the kind of Christian who believes that creation is corrupt and that I need to disavow myself of everything to do with creation and focus on heaven. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who sees value in human experience. After all, the whole purpose of religion is for human experience. So that's why I call myself a Christian.
The whole purpose of religion is for human experience.
I would disagree with that.
I would too.
I would say it's a mechanism of control. Period.
Absolutely, that's what I would say.
But
the experience of religion is not about control. It may be for someone who is on the top who is trying to control, but again, that's part of the experience. So again,
okay.
Whether it's about control or about hope or about just having those delusions and believing in them with all your heart and actually having something to believe in, having something to put everything about yourself into and focus on and give your life some meaning, in a situation where maybe there wouldn't otherwise be any. That is part of the experience.
Well, I think you can have that, and I shouldn't say I think you can. I know you can have that without religion, because I believe in lots of shit. I just don't believe in a deity. That's
John,
the difference.
John, I do want to. I really think that bears fleshing out. I hope you're not suggesting that. I don't think you are. That people that are atheistic don't have meaning in their lives.
No, I'm not. I'm saying that they have their own religion.
So, John, I don't think that you were suggesting this just having had conversations with you, but it sounded as though you were saying that the only way to derive meaning from life is through a religious context. And being an atheistic person myself, I don't think that you're suggesting that I can't find meaning to life. So, can you explain that a little bit better?
No, I'm not saying that atheists don't have meaning to their lives. I'm saying that they have a different way of achieving it, which in their own right, that is a religion. It's finding meaning where meaning otherwise wouldn't exist. That's a part of philosophy that is religious in its core value.
The danger you get is saying that atheism is religion, and that's where that tends to lead to, and it's not.
Well, religion doesn't mean a deity is necessarily involved. Look at Buddhism. Buddhism is all about hope and peace and what happens after you die, and there's no God involved at all.
I think that Buddhism is, in my opinion, is a pseudo religion, just because there aren't a lot of doctrines and such that religion is, to me, is very much a setup of rules in a way, and a focus. And I think that Buddhism doesn't really do that. Buddhism, you kind of choose your own focus.
I think what's happening is the danger here is John's assertion is that anytime you start to believe in something or accept something as true and you have a purpose that you've self-defined, that you are not religious. And you're kind of false trapping, like a lot of religious people do, to go, oh, see, everybody's religious. They're just religious in a different way. And I think that's blatantly fucking false.
You mentioned earlier that there is a structure, that there are tiers. And they're tiers that you cannot put your finger on. You can point to the earth, you can point to society, you can point to this or to point to that, but to put them in a structured order, placing them in a hierarchy of what is more important than something else.
I was referencing what humanism says as a generic viewpoint. They put, the planet first, universe and the planet first. They put this above themselves. They put other people above themselves, and they put themselves in, and then other things. It was just a way to allow an idea to spread. That's it.
Yeah, and that's why I don't really like to identify with it. To be honest with you, it kind of turned me off because it. Again, I have a holistic perspective that none of these things are more important because it's all relative. It's all about the moment. This certain thing might be more important at this moment, and a totally other thing more important at a different moment with different circumstances, with different people. I don't think you can put a hierarchy on any of this.
Well, I agree, and most people with a humanist perspective agree in the same right to that.
Well, now wait a minute. What if you come across someone, which I can name a few, and you're familiar with a couple of them. What if you come across someone who identifies as a humanist, but who places society, no matter what they say, their actions tell you that they place themselves before society, or they place society before the earth. I'll give you a good example. Somebody like J.D. Rockefeller, okay, very much a Baptist, but very much a humanist in that he was trying to progress society. He had altruistic intentions, but he went about it with some of the worst possible capitalism you could possibly imagine.
Well, the kicker is humanism doesn't say you have to do it this way.
What if you come across someone who does?
That's then a belief system, and I would characterize that in a religious context myself. So I would say that.
I would not fall into the no true Scotsman fallacy like Joel's sliding into right now.
No. I'm saying I'm not the true Scotsman in this case.
What I would say is that, if they call themselves a humanist, okay, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I can't say that you are not. And
this is a language game we're getting caught up in here.
And they could look at me and go, well, you're not a true humanist. Okay, no true Scotsman. Cool. Have a good day.
Well, the thing is we have to. So what we're doing right now is we're talking about these things. In order to talk about these things, we have to assign values to things, and in this case, the values are words. And we also can't talk about these extremely abstract and complicated concepts without kind of setting up some structure to it. So if that's what's happening, if we're only doing this for purposes of communication, setting up these tiers, I guess I'm okay with that. But I know deep down in my mind and just everything that I think, this stuff is not. It's not that. It's not these lines. There's no lines. All of that is imaginary.
I'm silent because that was so very profound.
Well, thank you. Did we lose Al, or did I just blow his mind? Did I finally fucking blow your mind, man?
You articulated something in a way that I have been reaching for and grasping for in a long while, so I thank you for that.
Right on.
If it means anything to you, I feel the same way about the totality of Christianity.
And I'm okay with that. Really,
that's my concern. Is if somebody were to tell me this is the definition of humanist, this, that, and the other, okay, I don't believe that. You're not a humanist. Okay, I'm not a humanist. I don't see you as a Christian, John.
Okay.
Well, I think what we're doing is you could use an analogy of math. If you're doing math and you're trying to figure things out, at a certain point, you have to assign a value to the number 2. What does the number 2 mean in such certain context? And in order to work these problems out, we have to do that. And I'm okay with that, but we've got to always do that with a skeptical mind, with a mind that is knowing that we're not talking about absolutes. We're just trying to make an easier way to figure this stuff out on these microscopic levels. So,
I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out on the macroscopic level. The individual to me is irrelevant.
I'm talking about the microscopic levels of time.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Define that for me, because that doesn't make any fucking sense.
The Joel giveth, the Joel taketh away.
You dickhead. I'm sorry, it was Dick Face, wasn't it?
Dick Face, yeah, I want that to come back. I like
Dick
it.
Face.
Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, again, it's just what I want to just establish is sort of an overseeing eye to all of this, is that we are just trying to figure this stuff out, and in order to do that, you've got to assign a place and space for some of this stuff. It's just like the concept of quantum physics. A particle isn't in a particular place until there's an observer, and so we're trying to observe this stuff. So all of a sudden everything has to be in a particular place, so that we can then extrapolate the information to some kind of meaningful degree.
Okay.
Wow. All right, so now that we've
double slit experiment, come on, guys.
Now that we've double spoke this and walked it in a circle a few times, we're well over the hour mark. Do we have anything we want to end on?
Actually, after you edit, I think you'll find that we're pretty close.
I also think that we should probably rename the podcast to Concentric Circles.
Wow.
Well,
it seems to be how we end up traveling.
So, Joel, do you have any websites or anything like that you want to plug before we go?
Ooh, can I just once again throw out the long essay or short book, depending on how you want to look at it, called Lying by Sam Harris. Really good read. It really helps understand the initial premise of this podcast in a way. I've listened to it on audiobook about 15 times because it's really powerful to me. So that I would suggest everyone pick that up.
Okay. John, what about you? You got any websites or anything like that you want to plug?
You know, it was a little bit pedantic, but I got a book I'd like to plug as well. I don't remember the author. I can go over to my bookshelf and grab it here in a second. It's a book called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist.
Oh, fuck. Are you kidding me right now?
No. And give me like half a second. I'll give you an author name. Hang on.
It doesn't matter.
I've read the book. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
I love the. I've had Christians just throw out the book title like a and then that's it. That's my argument.
Well, it's like when hardcore Christians throw out, well, if you just read the Bible, dude, I read the Bible. That's how I became an atheist.
I would read it for John's sake. I have to, because it sounds like Al's already read it, so maybe I should suffer.
Well, you should at least.
This might be my cross to bear.
Oh shit! You should look at Jim Jeffries. Watch Jim Jeffries' skit on
I love Jim Jeffries.
Jesus on the height of people and Jesus back then. It's really,
oh
really
yeah,
funny.
that's a great bit. That's a funny bit, man.
Got it right here. Norman L. Giesler, Geisler, and Frank Turek, Turek.
Yeah,
Two people to write that shit.
I don't
Yeah,
have enough faith to be an atheist. I found it a decent read, but again, I found it a little bit pedantic.
yeah. If you're gonna go with that, you need to look at Matt Dillahunty's deconstruction of that book.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
He tore into Turek in a debate and just decimated the shit out of him. So did Sam Harris. So did Christopher Hitchens.
Well,
And,
you have to admit though, decimated from. First of all, I don't really like that word in that context, but he destroyed him from our perspective. It's funny how these online debates, which I absolutely love, especially Hitchens. You got one website saying, William Lane Craig destroyed Christopher Hitchens, and then the exact same debate, and it's the other perspective from, depending on where you get the source.
Well, that's true, but you can independently verify and independently examine the claims made by both sides. And in all those, Frank Turek and, God, what's that other guy that got that Christian, Dinesh D'Souza. Their arguments just don't hold water, just like William Lane Craig and Ken Ham against Bill Nye. It just doesn't hold up. But I've read the book, John.
Does the defense's case hold water?
I have this book.
Sorry, I had to do a My Cousin Vinny reference there for some reason.
So from a purely philosophical standpoint, I found it to be a very useful book. From a purely factual, purely scientific, objective point of view, it's crap.
So
I agree with you.
basically what I'm hearing from you is, if you want to do a thought experiment, it's great to think about, but if you actually...
Oh!
And again...
that was actually funny timing. If you want to do a thought experiment, zip.
So, do we get any points for divine providence on him being...
No, you don't.
Okay.
Because obviously we don't. It's Schrodinger's cat. He might be doing the thought experiment right now. He's both doing it and not doing it right now. And Satan's back to the program. Thank you for joining us.
You know what? I just might edit that piece of audio of me coming in that last time as a fucking demonic voice. I just might do it. Fuck. Goddamn Google Hangouts. All right. So,
just for the record,
Joel Sandhar's book. What?
Just for the record, I'd like to point out Satan in the Old Testament, at least, loyal servant of God.
Adversary.
The adversary. That's correct.
Yep. Is that Lucifer? Translates to the adversary.
No, Shatan.
No. Oh, it is
Satan.
It is Satan. Okay, it is.
Yes.
My cat's name is Lucifer. Kind
Lucifer comes from Latin. It means light bringer.
Cool.
Yeah. The only one in that entire book that didn't do a fucking evil thing, but, hey, I don't judge.
Not the only one.
Well, I guess there are a bunch of babies that were killed in the flood. And they say God doesn't support abortion.
What the fuck? Okay.
Again, I'd like to point out that killing a bunch of babies in the flood, that's not abortion. That's infanticide. There's a difference.
Totally different.
No, because there were a bunch of pregnant. There would have been a bunch of pregnant women in the flood too, and those babies would have been killed. That'd have been abortion. And there are more babies born stillborn in this world than there are abortions. So the deity supports abortion. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Then it's not abortion. It's genocide. Whatever.
It's specieside or something.
Okay. So on that note, and before my fucking thing goes out,
Al, I assume we're kind of done here at this point. Can I make a request?
sure.
You know how you were kind enough that one time to make that clip of that thing that I enjoyed? That Joel goes off on war. I don't remember that profound thing that I said earlier, but can you find it and make that?
Yes, I will make that a clip. John,
that would make my day.
Do you have any requests for clips?
No.
Okay. All right, so the broadcast is going to stop.
Joel wins.
Why pray? So you think you can break me, but you are.